I would speak to you of heroes. Throughout our history, our country has been blessed with heroes, from Sergeant York to Patrick Henry to the Freedom Riders of the 60s to the 9/11 first responders. People who very clearly saw their goal and just as clearly saw the peril that stood between them and that goal. And with eyes wide open, walked straight into that peril in order to achieve that goal. And that is the true mark of the hero. And I stand here before you to tell you that every one of us, you, me, every one of us has within us the capacity to be such a hero. If we are awake and aware and see the situation and seize the situation, we can be heroes. And I know that because it happened to me. It happened in 1987 at the Philadelphia Folk Festival at the Campground. How many, raise hands, how many of you had been to the Philadelphia Folk Festival? And how many camped? Well, let me clue the rest of you in. You have not experienced the Philadelphia Folk Festival in its fullness until you camp. The campground at Philly is noisy and crowded and inconvenient and uncomfortable and blazing hot and freezing cold and dusty dry and muddy wet and wonderful. The campground in Philly is how can I encapsulate it for you? And think Woodstock meets Bangladesh. It's more than just those. It's the very air itself, redolent with that unmistakable perfume comprised of equal parts wood smoke, mud, and marijuana. It is an endless row of porta potties that at least once per festival will be appropriated by roving bands of merrymakers and repurposed as a community xylophone. It is living room furniture hand-carried half a mile from the parking lot, and inflatable swimming pools, and weather balloons, and hula hoops, and plastic flamingos, and battery-powered laser light shows, and a full 88-key spin-it piano in the bed of a camper pickup, and a World War II surplus amphibious landing craft sporting agricultural license plates decked out as a camper, and a 3/4 scale Brahma bull with a beer keg in its belly. But more than these physical manifestations, what the campground at Philly is at its heart is a collection of communities. A gathering of the tribes that reconvenes every August in that hayfield on the hillside like some brigadoon on acid. Tribes with names of power, names of mystery, names like Camelot and Aurora Borealis, and the Pod People, and the Flints, and the Philadelphia Jug Bands, and the Merry Pranksters, and the Bubbleheads, and of course the Azzoles. God bless them, the Azzoles. Now my particular enclave was called the Whipmaster Chargers, and there in itself is another story for another time. But on this particular year I had gotten a late start and arrived at camp and on Thursday evening instead of the afternoon, which was my usual practice, and discovered to my dismay that there was no space left within the boundaries of our enclave to set up my tent. So I was compelled to wander in the wilderness, an outcast, a refugee searching for a home. And finally, somewhere out in the hinterlands, I found a patch of green big enough to set up my tent. Did so, didn't get to meet my new neighbors right away, but grabbed my guitar and headed down to the festival grounds to renew old acquaintances and play some music. Got back relatively early for Philly, about 1:30, crawled into my sleeping bag and hit the rack. About 5 hours later, I got to meet my new neighbors, when one of them took it into his head to play upon the bagpipes directly behind my tent. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I liked pipes, and he was a good piper. But there is a time and a place for everything on God's green earth, and 6:30 on Friday morning in the campground of the Philadelphia Folk Festival is neither the time nor the place for the bagpipes. Thank you very much. So I piled bedding and pillows on top of my head, was actually kind of drowsing off to the drones when he finished his little serenade and commenced to greet the morning with a cheery, "Hey, campers, it's festival, man, party, party." Oh, God, he wasn't up early, he was up late. So I gave up and got dressed, crawled out of the tent, gave him the hairy eyeball, and went to get myself some breakfast. Saturday morning, 6:30. Pipes. This shall not continue. This is not acceptable. No sleeping through it for Mikey this time. I hauled on my pants, put on my glasses, went storming out of that tent with steam coming out of my ears. Now, I was never a brawler, and truth be told, I'm more than a little bit of a coward. And here's this big burly guy with half a dozen big burly drunk friends around him, and I didn't give a crap. I waded into that mob, elbowing people to the side, got right up in his faces. "Look, it's good piping, but it's a bad idea. There's people in those tents got to get some sleep. There's volunteers been working their shifts till 3 and 4 in the morning. They got to get some sleep. I'm in this goddamn tent right here, and I got to get some sleep. And your only purpose for doing that is to wake us up, and that is not cool. So stop it now, and don't do it ever again." He looks at me and says, "Man, I've been here for the past 5 years and piping in the morning every year. I ain't heard no complaints." I looked around and I said, "Do I hear any more complaints about the piping?" And from 20 tents all around, "Yes!" And he looked around and said, "Oh, sorry." And he folded up his pipes and went away. And all his friends went away. And I stood there, surveyed the field of battle, found myself the last man standing, victorious against the forces of evil, having saved the campground from a fate worse than death. And as a great invisible movie audience in the sky rose to its feet in thunderous applause, I thrust out my chest and walked off into the sunrise, an honest to God hero. Now, there is a denouement to this story. I immediately realized that this was a story. Could be a stage story. So when I got home, I sat down and composed the verbiage that you just heard. And about 3 or 4 weeks later, I was booked at the Eisteddfod Folk Festival in North Dartmouth, Massachusetts. And I told that story from the stage. And when I was done, I came off the stage, and this woman came up to me and said, "You were the one! You were the one! Thank you! Thank you!" I said, "Shucks, ma'am. 'Tweren't nothing any other red-blooded American hero wouldn't have done."